It felt like I was living in a dream that had slowly turned into a nightmare. My name is Jake, and I was married to Sarah for 6 years. To outsiders, we seemed like the perfect couple. We had a beautiful home in a quiet neighborhood, a solid circle of friends, and our shared dreams of starting a family. Yet beneath that glossy surface, things were beginning to crumble. The signs were always there. I just refused to see them. Sarah had been acting strangely for months, and I kept telling myself it was just stress from work. She was a marketing executive, and her hours were longer than ever. I would come home to find her buried in her laptop, tapping away while I cooked dinner. It felt like I was trying to talk to a wall. I brushed off her distracted demeanor, convincing myself that everything would bounce back to normal once her project was over. It wasn't until one fateful evening that everything changed. I had planned a romantic dinner to celebrate our anniversary. I even took the day off work to prepare, thinking it would be a nice surprise for her. I bought flowers, cooked her favorite meal, and set the mood with candles. But when she walked through the door, she looked exhausted and irritable, as if the last thing she wanted was to be there with me. After a half-hearted attempt to enjoy the meal, she snapped at me over a trivial issue. I was taken aback. Where was the woman I loved, the one who used to laugh at my terrible jokes and flirt with me, the woman who would playfully steal my fries when we went out to eat? That night ended in silence, both of us retreating to our corners of the house. Days passed, and I could sense something was off. I saw her texting more frequently, her eyes lighting up when she received notifications on her phone. My gut twisted every time she laughed at something on her screen. I knew I had to take action, so I decided to do a little digging. It was during one of those sleepless nights that I stumbled upon Sarah's secret. I had been scrolling through our shared computer, looking for signs of her changing behavior. I came across her email account, a moment I'll never forget. I opened an email titled, "Can't wait to see you again," dated just a week before. My heart raced as the familiar name popped up, Ryan, an old friend of hers from college. But their friendship had always seemed innocent, or so I thought. I read through the messages. They were filled with flirtation and longing, each word stabbing me deeper than the last. I could feel my breath quickening. Then I found something that shattered my world, their plans to meet up for drinks, followed by a mention of the best sex we've ever had. My stomach dropped, my heart shattered. The betrayal hit me like a freight train. I couldn't believe my wife was cheating on me. I had given her everything, my love, my trust, my loyalty, and she threw it all away like it was nothing. The shock morphed into a primal rage. I felt like a puppet whose strings had been cut, left to flail in the chaos of my emotions. I confronted her the next morning. I was trembling with anger and disbelief as I confronted her about Ryan. The look on her face when I laid out the evidence was something I'll never forget. She started with denial, of course, claiming I was misunderstanding everything. It was just a friendship, she said, and I was being paranoid. But her voice quivered, and for the first time I saw the cracks in her facade. "Jake, it's not what you think. He's just a friend. You know how I get when I'm stressed," she pleaded, her tone shifting from defensive to desperate. But I didn't want to hear her excuses. I wanted her to own up to what she had done. I kept pressing, wanting clarification, needing the truth. She finally broke. "Okay, fine. We hooked up a couple of times, but it didn't mean anything. I love you." That was the moment my heart broke in a way I never thought possible. How could she say she loved me while she was betraying everything we had built together? My mind raced with the memories of our life, filled with laughter, shared dreams, and love. It was all gone in an instant, replaced by anger and confusion. The confrontation only spiraled downward from there. She started throwing accusations back at me, saying I was too focused on work and not paying her enough attention. I wanted to scream. It was a twisted justification for her actions that made no sense. I felt trapped in a whirlwind of emotions, anger, sorrow, disbelief, and then a cold realization that our marriage was crumbling before my very eyes. As I sat there, I felt a mix of rage and sadness. I loved her, but I couldn't ignore the betrayal. I knew I had to make a choice. Would I fight for her, or would I start plotting my escape from this hell? The emotional turmoil had only just begun. I had no idea how deep the wounds would go or what I would have to face in the coming days. The journey toward healing and understanding was about to unfold, and I had no idea where it would take me. The days that followed were a blur of emotions. I wish I could say I took the high road, that I calmly weighed my options, but the truth was much uglier. I was like a hurricane, rotating between anger, despair, and moments of clarity. Sarah tried to talk to me, but I was so deep in my thoughts that I barely heard her. The sound of her voice, once soothing, now grated against my nerves. The morning after our confrontation, I woke up to find Sarah had left for work. I should have felt relief, but instead, the absence of her presence felt more like a void. I had no idea where to go from here. I went through the motions of daily life, but my heart was heavy, filled with betrayal. Friends reached out to check on me, worried about my well-being. I lied and told them I was fine. I didn't want anyone's pity, and I definitely didn't want to hear their unsolicited advice about marriage and relationships. But deep down, I was a mess, grappling with the reality that the woman I loved had chosen someone else. I felt like a spectator in my own life, watching from a distance. I enjoyed going to the gym, but even that felt hollow. I couldn't shake the image of Sarah laughing with Ryan, her eyes sparkling in a way that was meant for me. I pushed myself harder, lifting weights as if they could lift the weight off my heart. Then came the night when everything shifted. I was lying in bed, staring blankly at the ceiling when I received a text from Sarah. It was filled with explanations and apologies, claiming she was confused and missed me. Something about it felt insincere. I had to remind myself of the lies, how she had played me for a fool. I didn't even respond. Instead, I decided to take a different approach. I needed to gather information, not just for myself, but to understand what I was dealing with. I started to observe Sarah more closely. She had this uncanny ability to keep her secrets hidden, but I wasn't about to give up. I began tracking her movements, trying to find out how far the affair had gone. I was elbow-deep in a pit of intrigue, piecing together the reality of our life. It wasn't long before I discovered that Sarah had been lying about her late work nights. I saw her car parked in front of a bar on the other side of town one Friday evening when she claimed a work dinner. I felt my heart race as I recognized the building. I had been there before with friends, a place filled with laughter, good drinks, and bad decisions. I parked down the street, pretending to check my phone, but I was really watching. The sight of her sitting at the bar with Ryan hit me like a punch to the gut. They were laughing and leaning into each other, their bodies so close it felt like a slap in the face. I felt frozen, unable to move as the images burned into my mind. I was supposed to be at home, waiting for her to return, believing her lies. Instead, I was here on this side of the window, a voyeur to my own heartbreak. The anger surged within me again, stronger this time. I refused to be humiliated any longer. I stormed out of the parking lot, my heart racing from a mix of rage and a sense of empowerment. I could no longer stand by passively, pretending everything was fine. I felt like a man awakening from a slumber, ready to take back control of my life. Once I got home, I knew I had to think strategically. I didn't want to confront her in a way that would allow her to manipulate the narrative. I needed to be smart. I started planning my revenge, not the kind where I would stoop low to her level, but a calculated approach that would show her the consequences of her actions. I reached out to an old friend of mine, Tom. We used to hang out all the time, sharing beers and laughs, but life got busy and we drifted apart. I needed someone on my side, someone who would understand what I was going through. I told him everything, how Sarah betrayed me, the lies, the betrayal. He was shocked but supportive, ready to help me however I needed. Tom suggested I take some time for myself, focus on rebuilding my confidence and self-esteem. He reminded me that I was a good guy deserving of happiness, and I needed to remember that. I took his advice to heart. I started hitting the gym more frequently, working on my mental and physical well-being. I also dived into hobbies I had abandoned. I started painting again, something I used to love before life got in the way. As the weeks passed, I found myself feeling stronger, not just physically but emotionally. The more I focused on myself, the more I started to heal. I realized I didn't need Sarah's approval or validation. I could create a life that fulfilled me without her. Anger turned into determination, and I began to see the world from a new perspective. But just as I was beginning to feel empowered, Sarah made her next move. She returned home one evening and acted as if nothing had happened. She tried to engage me in conversation, but I was no longer the same man she had left behind. I had changed, and I wasn't going to let her back in so easily. "Sarah, we need to talk," I said firmly as she entered the living room, my heart pounding in my chest. I was ready to confront her about Ryan again, but this time I had the upper hand. I was no longer the man who would accept her lies. I was ready to face the situation head-on and lay down the boundaries she had shattered. The confrontation that followed would set the stage for everything to come. I wasn't going to be a passive victim anymore. It was time for her to face the consequences of her actions. I took a deep breath, preparing myself for the battle that lay ahead. As Sarah walked into the living room, the tension in the air was palpable. I could feel my heart racing, but this time it wasn't from a mix of anger and betrayal. It was a surge of newfound strength. I took a deep breath and steadied myself, ready to dive into the conversation I had been dreading but knew was necessary. "Sarah, we need to talk," I said firmly, ensuring my voice didn't waver. She froze for a moment, her eyes darting around as if searching for an escape route. I had no intention of letting her off the hook this time. "What about?" She replied, her tone defensive, but I could see the slight tremor in her hands. "About us, about you and Ryan," I declared, cutting through her evasiveness. "I know what's been going on." A flicker of surprise crossed her face, but she quickly masked it with a sneer. "You're still on that? I thought we agreed to move past it, Jake. I told you it was a mistake." Her eyes narrowed, and I could sense her lying instinct kicking in, trying to deflect the blame. "Move past it." "Sarah, you haven't even acknowledged what you did. You lied to me again and again. I saw you at the bar with him. Don't even pretend this was just some fling. You've been keeping him in the shadows while I trusted you with everything." I snapped, my anger rising. Her response was to roll her eyes, a move that fueled my rage further. "You're being dramatic. It was just a stupid thing I did when I was feeling lost. You can't keep blaming me for that." "Dramatic?" I shot back, incredulous. "You think cheating on your husband is just a minor mistake. You destroyed the trust we built. You destroyed us." I could feel the weight of my words pressing down on her. I was no longer the submissive husband who would take her excuses. She had crossed a line, and I was here to draw the boundaries she had trampled over. "I can't keep doing this, Sarah. You need to understand that this isn't just about your actions, it's about the implications for us. I loved you, and you threw that away for someone else." My voice softened slightly, but the pain was still evident. She sighed, her defenses crumbling as she leaned against the doorway, arms crossed tightly over her chest. "What do you want me to say? I messed up, okay? I didn't think I'd hurt you this much. I thought we could fix this." "Fix this?" I echoed, incredulous. "You can't just walk back into my life and expect everything to be okay after what you did. You chose him over me. If you really wanted to fix things, you wouldn't have gone behind my back. You'd have been honest with me." A moment of silence hung between us. I could see the realization dawning on her face, the weight of what she had done settling in. But I also knew her well enough to anticipate her next move. She was skilled at twisting the narrative, and I needed to be prepared. "Jake, I was lonely. You were always busy with work, and I felt neglected. I didn't know how to deal with it. That's why I turned to Ryan," she pleaded, her voice rising with desperation. "You can't just throw everything away because of a few mistakes." "A few mistakes?" I shot back, incredulous. "This wasn't a minor slip-up, Sarah. You made a choice. You can't blame it on my work schedule. You could have talked to me instead of sneaking around." I watched her face contort with emotions, anger, sadness, regret. For a moment I felt a twinge of compassion, but I quickly buried it. I had to remain firm. I couldn't allow her to manipulate my feelings anymore. "Jake, please," she said, her voice dropping slightly. "I love you. I made a mistake, but I want to make it right. Can't we at least try to work through this together?" I shook my head. "It's not that simple anymore, Sarah. You shattered the foundation of our relationship, and trust is not something that can be repaired overnight. I need time to think about what I want." Her eyes filled with tears, and I could see the facade she had built starting to crumble. "What do you mean by that? Are you saying you want to leave me? I don't know yet, but I can't stay in a relationship where I feel like a second choice. I replied, my tone steady, but my heart was racing. As the conversation continued, I felt more empowered. Each word I spoke was a step toward reclaiming my life. I wasn't going to let her dictate my feelings anymore. I had spent so long trying to please her, trying to be the perfect husband, but now it was time to focus on myself. The emotional impact of the conversation was heavy, and as we delved deeper into the discussion, I felt a mix of sadness and relief. I was finally standing up for myself, asserting my boundaries. No longer was I the passive partner accepting blame for everything. I was ready to confront the reality of our marriage and the possibility of its end. When the conversation finally concluded, we sat in silence, both of us processing the weight of our words. I could see that Sarah was struggling with regret, and for the first time, I felt a sense of sadness for her. But I also knew that I had to prioritize my own well-being. That night, as I lay in bed alone, I felt a mix of fear and excitement. The path ahead was uncertain, but I knew I was no longer willing to tolerate betrayal and lies. I began to visualize what my life could look like, free from the chains of a broken relationship. I still loved Sarah, but love was enough to mend what had been shattered. The journey to healing would take time, and I was now ready to embrace it, no matter how difficult it might be. I understood that I deserved better, and I was determined to find it, whether with Sarah or without her. With that thought, I drifted off to sleep, feeling a flicker of hope amidst the chaos. I was ready to take control of my life, and whatever happened next would be my choice. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions, leaving me caught between reflection and anticipation. I had set a firm boundary with Sarah, but I still wasn't fully ready to let go of everything we'd built together. Each day felt like a tug-of-war within me. I was angry, devastated, yet somehow empowered by the decisions I was making. I focused on myself, working out, painting, and reconnecting with friends. I started spending more time with Tom, my old friend who had been supportive throughout this mess. We would grab beers and talk about life, and I found solace in the camaraderie. It felt good to have someone who understood the depth of my pain and the weight of my betrayal. I poured out my feelings, and for the first time in a long while I felt heard. One evening after a long day at work, I received a call from Sarah. I hesitated, knowing it could either be another attempt to manipulate the narrative or a genuine outreach, but I also knew I needed closure one way or another. I answered, my heart pounding. "Hey, Jake," she said, her voice softer than I remembered. "Hey," I replied cautiously, unsure of how to navigate this conversation. "I know things have been tense between us," she continued, "and I just wanted to see if we could talk again. I've been doing a lot of thinking." There was something vulnerable in her tone that caught my attention. "About what?" I asked, trying to keep my emotions in check. "About us, about my mistakes. I want to be honest with you this time," she pleaded. "Can we meet up?" I took a moment to consider it. Part of me wanted to give her a chance to explain herself, hoping for some clarity. But another part of me was wary, still nursing the wounds she inflicted. I finally agreed to meet her at a cafe we used to frequent, somewhere that held memories for both of us, some good, some painful. When I arrived, I felt a mix of anticipation and dread. The cafe was bustling with life, but the contrast to my inner turmoil was stark. Sarah was already seated, fidgeting with her coffee mug as I approached. She looked different, more vulnerable, as if the weight of her actions had finally settled on her shoulders. "Thanks for coming," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Let's just get to the point," I replied, my tone flat. I didn't want to dance around the issue anymore. "I've been seeing a therapist," she began, her eyes searching mine. "I know I messed up. I've spent so long avoiding the truth about how I felt about us. I thought the affair would fill a void, but all it did was create a bigger one." I watched her closely, looking for any signs of manipulation, but there was a sincerity in her eyes I hadn't seen before. "And what do you think that void was?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "I was unhappy, Jake. I felt lonely, and I didn't express that to you. I thought you were too wrapped up in your work to notice me," she admitted, her voice cracking slightly. "But that doesn't excuse what I did." "It doesn't," I agreed. but at least you're acknowledging it." She took a deep breath, collecting her thoughts. "I want to do better. I want to fight for us. I know I don't deserve it after everything, but I'm willing to put in the effort. I know this won't be easy, but I want to try." I felt a whirlwind of emotions crash over me. Part of me wanted to believe her, wanted to believe that love could overcome this betrayal. But another part of me was screaming to protect myself from getting hurt again. "You can't just expect me to forgive you right away," I said firmly. "I know," she nodded, her expression earnest. "I wouldn't expect that. I just want you to know that I'm serious about changing. I'd even be willing to cut ties with Ryan entirely." The thought that she would be willing to sever that connection brought a flicker of hope, but I wasn't ready to let my guard down completely. "And what if you do? What if you slip back into the same patterns?" I challenged, needing reassurance. "I can't promise that I won't mess up again, but I can promise to be committed to working on myself and our relationship. I want to rebuild what we had brick by brick," she replied, her voice steady. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the conversation settling in. I was conflicted, tethered between love and pain. I wanted to believe her, but the scars of her betrayal still stung. "Maybe we can take things slow," I suggested finally. "Let's not rush into anything. I need time to process everything, time to see if you're truly committed to changing." Sarah nodded, relief flooding her features. "I can do that. I want to show you that I can be better for us." As we talked more about our feelings and what led to the rift in our marriage, I could see glimpses of the woman I fell in love with, the one who was passionate and caring. But I also knew the road ahead would be fraught with challenges. It wouldn't be easy to mend what had been broken. Leaving the cafe, I felt a strange mix of hope and caution. Part of me was willing to explore the possibility of rebuilding our relationship, but another part warned me to guard my heart. I needed to protect myself while still allowing space for healing. In the days that followed, we began a tentative journey toward reconnection. We started having honest conversations, sharing feelings that had long been buried. I could see that Sarah was genuinely trying, but I knew it would take more than words to fix our marriage. I continued to lean on Tom, who reminded me to stay grounded and focused on my personal growth. "You have to remember to look out for yourself," he advised. "You deserve to be happy, whether it's with her or on your own." I took his advice to heart. I focused on my interests and explored new hobbies, pushing myself to embrace the man I wanted to be. I started to feel like I was rediscovering a sense of self that had been overshadowed. As Sarah and I navigated this new phase, I began to reflect on the lessons I was learning. I realized that relationships require work from both sides and that communication is key. But I also recognized the importance of mutual respect and trust. I didn't know where our journey would ultimately lead, whether we could truly rebuild our marriage or whether I needed to walk away. But I was ready to face whatever came next. I was no longer a passive participant in my life. I was reclaiming my narrative, one choice at a time. The road ahead would be long, but I was prepared to take it, step by step. I was learning that sometimes healing comes from within, and the journey to self-discovery can pave the way to a brighter future. As the weeks rolled on, I found myself caught in a delicate balancing act between healing and reconnection. The renewed commitment between Sarah and me was built on a shaky foundation, but it was a start. We pledged to communicate more openly, to be honest about our feelings, and to work on our weaknesses. Yet, I was always aware of the precariousness of our situation. Sarah was making an effort to show me she was serious about changing. She met with her therapist regularly, started attending workshops on relationships, and even took a few classes focused on self-improvement. I was cautiously optimistic, noticing small changes in her demeanor. She seemed more attentive, more engaged. We began to spend evenings together, reminiscing about the good times we had shared before everything went awry. But lingering beneath the surface were doubts. I found myself questioning whether her transformation was genuine or just a temporary response to the chaos we had experienced. I kept reminding myself that trust takes time to rebuild, and I needed to stay vigilant. I couldn't allow myself to fall back into complacency. One evening, as we were sitting on the couch watching a movie, Sarah's phone buzzed on the coffee table. My heart raced for a moment, the same old feelings of anxiety creeping back in. She glanced at her phone, hesitated, then grabbed it quickly. "Just a work text," she said, her gaze darting away from me. I didn't want to pry, but the instinct to protect myself was hard to suppress. "You've been getting a lot of work texts lately," I remarked, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Yeah, it's busy season," she replied, but there was a tightness in her voice. I could see the hesitation in her eyes and my pulse quickened. "Is everything okay?" I asked, trying to sound casual, though I felt anything but. "Of course," she said, her voice a little too bright. "I promise I'm focused on us. You're my priority." I wanted to believe her, but the unease lingered. I brushed it off, convincing myself that I was being paranoid. The past months had been filled with emotional turmoil, and perhaps I was still grappling with the aftermath of betrayal. The next few days passed with a mix of hope and uncertainty. I tried to focus on my own growth, attending a few workshops on self-empowerment and self-esteem. I was realizing that I had to be the architect of my own happiness, regardless of what happened with Sarah. But then, one fateful night, everything changed. I had planned a weekend trip with Tom to clear my head and reset my perspective. The timing felt right. I needed to step away from everything to gain some clarity. I packed my bags, excited for a brief escape. But as we were about to leave, Sarah came home, early from work. "Hey, I thought you were going to be gone for the weekend," she said, her eyes lighting up with surprise. "I was, but I decided to take off earlier," I replied, my heart racing. "Just needed some time away to think." She nodded, but I noticed a flicker of apprehension in her eyes. "Can we talk before you go?" I hesitated, feeling the weight of the moment. "Sure," I replied, my curiosity piqued. As we moved to the kitchen, I could sense the tension in the air. "Jake, I want you to know how much I appreciate your patience during all of this. I'm really trying to work through my issues," she began, her voice earnest. "I appreciate that, Sarah, but I also think it's important for both of us to take time to reflect on our relationship separately," I replied cautiously, not wanting to get sucked into old patterns. She sighed. "I understand, but I've been thinking about us a lot, and I want to make sure we're moving in the right direction. I want to prove to you that I can be the partner you deserve." I felt a flicker of hope at her words, but I wasn't going to let it cloud my judgment. "Actions speak louder than words, you know." "I know," she said, her voice soft. "I just want to be transparent with you. I'm ready to cut things off with Ryan for good. I don't want any distractions between us." I nodded, appreciating her willingness to take that step. But as we talked, something nagged at me. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was still more she wasn't revealing. As I finished packing for the trip, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was a message from Tom confirming our plans. I glanced up and saw Sarah looking at her phone again. "Is that another work text?" I asked, using the same light tone she had offered earlier. "No, it's actually just my friend from work," she replied, her voice too quick, too practiced. I narrowed my eyes, sensing a shift in her demeanor. The conversation continued, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. As I left for the trip, I felt the heaviness of doubt settle over me. Tom and I arrived at the cabin and settled in. As we cracked open a couple of beers, I tried to push Sarah out of my mind. We laughed, reminiscing about old times, and for a moment I felt liberated from my worries. But as the night wore on, I could feel the tension creeping back in. "Are you okay, man?" Tom asked, noticing my distracted demeanor. "Yeah, just thinking about Sarah and everything that's happened," I admitted. "I'm still trying to figure out what I want." "Remember, you're not in this alone," he reassured me. "You're stronger than you give yourself credit for. Whatever decision you make sure it's for you." Those words resonated deep within me, and I took them to heart. I needed to prioritize my well-being above all else. The next morning, I decided to let loose and put my worries aside. We hiked, grilled burgers, and laughed until my sides hurt. But late that night, as I lay in bed, my phone buzzed again. It was a text from Sarah. "Hey, just wanted to check in. Hope you're having fun. Miss you, red heart." A wave of conflicting emotions surged through me. The sweet sentiment felt genuine, yet I couldn't shake the unease. I decided to respond with a simple "Thanks, I miss you too." But as I lay there staring at the ceiling, my mind raced. Was she really trying to change, or was she weaving a new web of deceit, It was hard to know what to believe. The next morning, I woke up feeling restless. Something was nagging at me, an itch I couldn't scratch. I needed clarity, not just for my relationship with Sarah, but for my own sense of self. I called Tom to discuss my thoughts. Something just feels off, I confessed. I thought we were moving in the right direction, but I can't shake the feeling that she's still hiding something. Have you considered checking in on her, just to see what's really going on? Tom suggested tentatively. I hesitated, knowing that snooping felt wrong, but something inside me pushed back. If I was going to reclaim control over my life, I needed to know the truth. Yeah, maybe I will, I said reluctantly. I'll give it some thought. The trip was supposed to be a break, but now it felt more like a descent into uncertainty. I realized that whatever lay ahead would require not just strength but a willingness to confront the truth, no matter how painful it might be. As I packed my things to head back home, I steeled myself for the decision I was about to make. I would reach out to Sarah, and I would search for answers. I had come too far to turn back now, and I was determined to face whatever came next head-on. As I drove back from the cabin with Tom, my mind was racing, filled with questions and the weight of uncertainty. I was determined to confront Sarah about everything that had been eating away at me. I needed to know if she was truly committed to making things right, or if I was just another player in a game she hadn't yet put down. When I arrived home, I was greeted by the familiar scent of our shared space. It felt different now, almost foreign, as if the walls were whispering remnants of the betrayal that had unfolded. I took a moment to gather my thoughts before seeing Sarah. I didn't want to approach her out of anger. I needed to be clear-headed and focused. I found her in the living room, curled up on the couch with a book. She looked up as I entered, her eyes brightening momentarily before settling into a look of uncertainty. "Hey, you're back early," she said, setting down the book. "Yeah, just felt like it was time," I replied, my tone steady. "We need to talk." Her expression shifted, an amalgamation of anxiety and anticipation. "About what?" "About us. About everything." I gestured for her to sit up. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I need to know if you're still in contact with Ryan." The color drained from her face, and I could see the gears turning in her mind. "Jake, I told you I was cutting ties with him. But are you? Are you really?" I pressed, my heart pounding. "I want you to be honest with me. This is important." She hesitated, and in that silence I felt the air grow thick with tension. "I haven't talked to him since our last conversation. I swear," she said, her voice earnest. "I'm trying to be better, I promise. Are you? Because I just can't shake the feeling that you're still hiding something from me," I said, bracing myself for her response. "I'm not. I've been working on myself, Jake. I'm seeing a therapist, I've started volunteering, and I genuinely want to fix this," she pleaded, her eyes welling up with emotion. I softened slightly. I wanted to believe her, I truly did. But the scars of her betrayal were still fresh, and the memory of watching her with Ryan haunted me. "Okay, then let's take a step back. I need to know you're willing to fight for us, and that means being completely honest." "I am willing," she exclaimed, her voice breaking. "What do I need to do to prove it to you?" "Let's start with transparency," I replied, my tone firm. "I want to know everything, no more secrets. If you're serious about this, we need to build trust." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'll do anything, Jake. I'll show you that I can be the partner you deserve. Just please don't give up on me." The rawness of her emotion struck a chord deep within me. I saw the woman I fell in love with, buried beneath layers of hurt and mistakes. But I also knew that love alone wouldn't be enough to heal the wounds she had inflicted. "I want to give you a chance, but I need to protect myself too. I can't go back to the way things were. I need to move forward," I said, my heart racing. "So here's the deal. I'm willing to try to rebuild, but it'll take time. I'll need to see actions that match your words." Sarah nodded, and I could see the determination in her eyes. "I'll show you, I promise. Just give me that chance." As the days turned into weeks, we began the slow process of rebuilding our relationship. Sarah made genuine efforts to connect with me, and I found myself cautiously opening up. There were difficult conversations about our past, moments of vulnerability where we shared our fears and insecurities. I started to see glimpses of the old Sarah, the one who had captivated me with her laughter and adventurous spirit. But I also knew we were two very different people now, shaped by the experiences we had endured. One night, After a particularly long day, I found myself sitting on the couch, deep in thought. Sarah joined me, her head resting on my shoulder. "Can I ask you something?" she said softly. "Of course," I replied, feeling a mix of apprehension and hope. "Do you think we can really make this work?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I took a deep breath, weighing my response carefully. "I think we can, but it won't be easy. We'll have to keep working at it, and I need to know you're committed to that." "I am," she said firmly. "Every single day, I'm working on becoming a better person for you and for us." As the weeks turned into months, we both learned to navigate our new reality. I was still cautious, but I also began to allow myself to hope. We started going to couples therapy, which became a safe space for us to explore our feelings and work through our issues with guidance. Sarah's commitment to change was evident, and I appreciated the effort she was putting in. I could see her growing more self-aware, and it was inspiring to witness. But I also knew that trust was a fragile thing. It needed to be nurtured and respected. One evening, after what felt like a small victory in therapy, we sat on the porch watching the sunset. It was an ordinary moment, but it felt special. "You know," I said, breaking the silence, "I still think about what happened. It's a part of my life now, and I won't forget it." "I know," Sarah replied softly. "And you don't have to. All I can do is show you that I'm trying to make things right. I want you to feel safe with me again." "I appreciate that," I said, feeling a sense of warmth spread through me. "I want to believe that we can rebuild this, that we can come out stronger, but it will take both of us." As we sat there, I realized that the journey ahead still had twists and turns. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of hope. I wasn't just rebuilding a marriage, I was reclaiming my life. In the end, I learned that life isn't about a single mistake defining us, but rather how we choose to respond to it. Healing takes time, effort, and a willingness to embrace vulnerability. I didn't know what the future held for Sarah and me, but I was ready to face it head on. I had discovered strength I didn't know I had, and I was committed to carving out a path forward, whether it was together or apart. The journey was just beginning, and for the first time I was ready to embrace whatever came next.